Los Angeles was a city that never truly slept. The streets buzzed with life, neon lights flickered against the pavement, and the air carried a blend of gasoline, sweat, and overpriced cologne. Pedestrians moved in a rush, their eyes fixed on their destinations, their minds occupied with 1,000 worries, but none of them spared a second glance for the man sitting on the sidewalk, a cardboard sign propped against his knees. Nathan Carter barely felt the cold anymore. His body had learned to adapt, his skin thickened to the unforgiving reality of concrete beds and empty stomachs. He adjusted his tattered jacket, pulling it tighter around himself as if it could shield him from the indifference of the world. His fingers, rough and calloused, absently traced the faded letters on his sign, "Can you spare $1?" It was a question no one answered. A group of well-dressed businessmen walked past, their laughter crisp and sharp like the clinking of whiskey glasses. A woman in high heels took a half-step away, clutching her designer purse tighter, as if poverty itself was contagious. A man in a sleek sports car revved his engine at a stoplight, the bass from his music pounding in the air, just another reminder of a world Nathan no longer belonged to. His stomach ached. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, and even then, it had only been scraps from a dumpster behind a fast food joint. Hunger gnawed at him like an old wound that never quite healed. His pride had died a long time ago, but shame still lingered. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face, feeling the roughness of his unshaven beard. Just another day. Just another hour. Then, something changed. The footsteps approaching him weren't hurried. They weren't hesitant either. There was a calmness to them, an unshakable ease, like they belonged to someone who didn't fear the world, who had no reason to rush or avoid eye contact. Nathan sensed the presence before he looked up. A man stood before him, dressed simply, jeans, a dark hoodie, hands in his pockets. Sunglasses hid his eyes, but something about him felt familiar. $1, the man read aloud, his voice even, almost amused. That's all you need? Nathan stiffened. It wasn't the words themselves but the way the man said them, like he already knew the answer was a lie. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. Yeah. Enough to get something to eat. The man tilted his head slightly, studying him. The silence stretched, thick with something unspoken. Then, with the ghost of a smile, he said, "What if I told you I could offer you something better?" Nathan's fingers curled around the edges of his cardboard sign, his heartbeat quickening. He had heard plenty of lines from strangers before, empty pity, forced sympathy, meaningless clichés. But there was something different about this man. His voice carried neither condescension nor charity. It was steady, almost as if he were stating a fact rather than making an offer. Nathan narrowed his eyes. Better? What's better than eating when you're starving? The man didn't flinch. If anything, the corner of his lips twitched, like he was expecting the skepticism. Surviving isn't the same as living. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded bill. For a second, Nathan thought he was actually handing him money, but instead, the man held it between his fingers, turning it absently as if considering something. "I could give you this right now, and maybe you'll eat today. But then what? You'll be right back here tomorrow. Holding the same sign. Asking the same question." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that?" His voice came out rougher than intended, anger bubbling beneath the surface. He didn't need a lecture. He needed food. "If you're not gonna help, just keep walking like everyone else." The man didn't move. His voice remained calm. "I am helping. Just not in the way you expect." He crouched down, bringing himself to Nathan's level, and for the first time, Nathan could really see his face. The stubble along his jaw. The faint lines of exhaustion beneath his eyes. The man wasn't just someone, he was someone familiar. Realization hit like a jolt of electricity. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. No way. The man finally removed his sunglasses, revealing deep brown eyes filled with something unreadable. Recognition washed over Nathan in a wave of disbelief. "Yeah," the man said, voice laced with quiet amusement. "It's me." Nathan blinked, his brain struggling to catch up. Keanu Reeves. Keanu fucking Reeves. Sitting on the dirty sidewalk next to him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Nathan let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. This has to be a joke." Keanu smirked, slipping his sunglasses back on. "No joke. But it is a choice. You can take this $1, he held up the bill, or you can come with me. I won't promise you a miracle, but I'll promise you something real. A way out." Nathan stared at him. His instincts screamed at him to grab the money and be done with it. But another part of him, one he had long since buried, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was something beyond this street corner. His fingers twitched, itching to reach for the bill. Keanu's voice dropped to something almost conspiratorial. "You've already lost everything. What's one more risk?" The words hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Nathan swallowed hard. Then, against everything his survival instincts told him, he let out a shaky breath and muttered, "Screw it. Let's go." Nathan hesitated for only a second before pushing himself up from the cold pavement. His legs ached from hours of sitting, but there was something else beneath the discomfort now, something unfamiliar. A flicker of adrenaline. Of possibility. Keanu didn't say another word as he turned and started walking, and Nathan found himself following without question, as if his body had already decided before his mind could catch up. They weaved through the crowded sidewalks, past storefronts and late-night cafes, their steps falling into an unspoken rhythm. Nathan's pulse hammered in his ears. The city had always felt vast and merciless, a place designed to swallow people like him whole. But now, with Keanu leading the way, it felt different. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the absurdity of it all. Or maybe it was the first time in years someone had actually looked at him, not through him, not past him, but at him. They stopped in front of a small hotel, the kind Nathan had passed by countless times, dreaming of a warm bed and a door that locked. Keanu pushed open the door, nodding toward the front desk. "One night. Get cleaned up. We'll talk after." Nathan's throat tightened. He had expected a lecture, maybe even another test. But Keanu simply handed the receptionist a credit card, as if this was the most ordinary thing in the world. As if this was no different than buying himself a cup of coffee. Inside the room, Nathan stared at the mirror. His reflection was almost unrecognizable, hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, hair that had lost its color beneath months of grime. He ran a hand through his tangled mess of curls, his fingers catching in the knots. The shower was scalding, burning away the dirt, the exhaustion, the months of sleeping on concrete. He stayed under the water longer than necessary, letting it pound against his shoulders, washing away everything that clung to him like dead weight. When he finally stepped out, steam curling around him, he felt lighter. Not fixed. Not new. But lighter. A clean set of clothes waited for him on the bed, nothing fancy, just jeans and a fresh t-shirt, but they felt like armor. He pulled them on, the fabric unfamiliar against his skin. Keanu was waiting in the lobby, hands in his pockets, watching the world move past the glass doors. When Nathan approached, Keanu gave him a once-over and smirked. "Not bad. You almost look like you belong here." Nathan huffed a dry laugh. "Don't get used to it." Keanu gestured toward the exit. "Come on. We're not done yet." They walked again, but this time, Nathan felt different. More aware. The weight of his old clothes was gone, the grime scrubbed away, but the years of struggle still clung to him, invisible and unshakable. He wondered if Keanu saw it. If he saw how close Nathan was to bolting, to convincing himself this was all some elaborate joke the universe was playing on him. They stopped at a hardware store. Nathan frowned as Keanu led him inside, the scent of metal and sawdust hitting him all at once. Shelves lined with tools stretched before them, rows of wrenches, drills, and screwdrivers gleaming beneath fluorescent lights. Nathan's stomach twisted. Keanu handed him a shopping basket. "Pick what you need." Nathan blinked at him. "What?" "You heard me." Keanu nodded toward the aisles. "Get what you need to work again." Nathan's fingers curled around the basket handle. His mouth felt dry. I don't know if I can still do it." Keanu didn't waver. "Then let's find out." Nathan hesitated, but his feet carried him forward before he could think too much. He moved through the aisles, his hands skimming over tools he hadn't touched in years. A pair of pliers. A screwdriver set. A digital multimeter. Each item felt heavier than it should, like they carried the weight of his old life, a life he wasn't sure he was allowed to claim again. He paused at a wrench, fingers hovering over it. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. "Take it," Keanu said from behind him, voice steady. Nathan exhaled shakily and picked it up. By the time they reached the checkout, the basket was filled. Not much, just the essentials, but enough to make something real. Nathan gripped the straps tightly, the weight familiar in his hands. As Keanu paid, Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know how I'm supposed to pay you back for this." Keanu glanced at him, expression unreadable. Then, with a small smile, he said, "You will." Nathan wasn't sure why, but the word settled something in his chest. They left the store, stepping back into the neon-lit night. Nathan's grip on the bag of tools tightened. He had no idea what the next step was. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid to take it. The night air was crisp as Nathan followed Keanu down the quiet streets, the weight of the tool bag pressing against his palm like an anchor. It felt strange, having something solid in his hands again, something that wasn't just a cardboard sign or a half-empty cup of coins. It wasn't just a bag of tools. It was a lifeline. They stopped in front of a modest-looking industrial building, the kind Nathan used to walk past without a second thought. A metal sign above the door read Benson Mechanics. The faint hum of machinery buzzed from inside, accompanied by the occasional metallic clang of tools against steel. The smell of oil and sweat hit Nathan like a memory, sending a pulse of something both familiar and terrifying through his veins. Keanu pulled open the door, stepping inside without hesitation. Nathan hesitated. His grip on the bag tightened. His mind screamed at him to turn around, to run before someone inside recognized what he was now instead of what he used to be. Keanu glanced over his shoulder. "You coming?" Nathan swallowed the lump in his throat and forced his legs to move. The workshop was alive with motion. Workers in coveralls moved between tool benches, tightening bolts, welding metal, and inspecting engine parts. The smell of grease and burnt rubber filled the air. Nathan had lived in places like this once, his hands stained with the same oil, his muscles aching from the same work. But now, he felt like an intruder in a world he barely remembered how to navigate. A man approached, wiping his hands on a grease-covered rag. He was in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mark Benson. He looked at Keanu, then at Nathan, his gaze skeptical. "So this is the guy?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah. He's the guy." Mark crossed his arms. "And you think he can handle it?" Nathan's stomach twisted. He felt like a specimen under a microscope, a problem waiting to be solved. Keanu didn't hesitate. "I know he can." Mark let out a sharp breath, sizing Nathan up. "You got experience?" Nathan forced himself to meet his eyes. 15 years in mechanical work. "But, it's been a while." Mark grunted. "I don't do charity hires. If you're here, you earn your place." He gestured toward a workbench in the corner. "There's a busted generator over there. It's got a wiring issue. You fix it, we'll talk." You mess it up, you walk. Nathan's pulse hammered. He didn't expect a handout, but the pressure weighed on him like a cinder block. He had spent years letting himself believe he wasn't capable anymore. Now, he had to prove himself, not just to them, but to himself. He dropped his bag on the floor, pulled out a screwdriver, and got to work. His hands shook at first. The old fears clawed at the back of his mind, whispering that he was too rusty, too far gone. But muscle memory was a stubborn thing. The second he unscrewed the panel and saw the tangled mess of wires, something inside him clicked. He traced the circuits with his fingers, muttering calculations under his breath. The generator was old, its internals a mess of poorly connected leads and corroded fuses. It wasn't pretty, but it wasn't impossible. He worked with focus, shutting out the noise around him. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Nathan barely noticed Mark and Keanu watching as he twisted wires, tightened connections, and carefully reassembled the panel. His fingers moved with the kind of confidence he had forgotten he had. When he was done, he stepped back and wiped his brow with his sleeve. Mark walked over and flipped the switch. The generator roared to life. The steady hum of working machinery filled the air, vibrating beneath Nathan's feet. For a split second, silence followed. Then Mark let out a low whistle, nodding in approval. "Not bad," he said. "Not bad at all." Nathan exhaled the breath he didn't realize he was holding. Mark studied him for another moment, then jerked his head toward the back of the shop. "Be here at 6 a.m. sharp. You miss a day, you're out. Understood?" Nathan nodded, his throat tight. "Understood." Mark wiped his hands on his rag again. "Welcome to the crew." Keanu clapped Nathan on the back, grinning. "Told you." Nathan didn't say anything. He couldn't. His chest felt too full, his mind still struggling to process the shift that had just happened. He had a job. A real damn job. As they walked out of the shop, Keanu stuffed his hands in his pockets. Not bad for a guy who thought he couldn't do it. Nathan shook his head, letting out a breathless laugh. "I don't even know what to say." Keanu smirked. "Then don't say anything. Just show up." Nathan nodded, gripping the bag of tools tighter. For the first time in years, he had a reason to. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen over Los Angeles, Nathan stood outside Benson Mechanics, his breath visible in the crisp air. He had barely slept. His mind had been too wired, too restless with the realization that he had a place to be. That he wasn't waking up on the cold pavement of some forgotten alley but standing in front of a workshop, ready to work again. At exactly 6 a.m., Mark Benson unlocked the doors, giving Nathan a curt nod as he stepped inside. The shop smelled like metal and grease, the sound of engines and tools humming as workers filed in. Nathan tightened his grip on his tool bag and exhaled slowly. He was here. This was real. The first week was brutal. His body had grown used to sleeping on sidewalks, not standing for 10 hours a day under the heat of industrial lights. Every muscle ached, his hands stiff from years of disuse. Mistakes were inevitable. He miscalculated a voltage reading, tightened a bolt too hard, nearly dropped a carburetor during an installation. But he pushed through. Every stumble, every grunt from Mark, every impatient glance from the other mechanics fueled something inside him that had been dormant for years. By the third week, it was second nature again. The wrench fit perfectly in his grip, the hum of an engine beneath his fingertips felt familiar, the satisfaction of finishing a job right was intoxicating. He stopped feeling like an outsider and started feeling like a mechanic again. One afternoon, during a rare break, Nathan leaned against a workbench, wiping the sweat from his brow when Mark approached. "Not bad, Carter," Mark said, tossing him a bottle of water. "Figured you'd have quit by now." Nathan smirked, cracking open the bottle. "Figured you'd have fired me by now." Mark snorted, shaking his head. "You're rough around the edges, but you're solid. I've seen guys with cleaner resumes fold under pressure. You don't fold. He crossed his arms. That's why I'm making you full-time. Pay raise included. The words hit Nathan like a punch to the gut, but the good kind, the kind that steals your breath in the best way possible. He had come here thinking he was going to fail, that he was going to fall back into the same cycle of trying and losing. But he hadn't lost. Mark stuck out his hand. Welcome back to the real world. Nathan took it, gripping tight. Feels good to be here. That night, Nathan walked back to the small apartment he had managed to rent, a one-room space with a mattress on the floor and a single window that overlooked the street. It wasn't much, but it was his. As he placed his keys on the counter, his fingers brushed against a small, folded piece of paper. He pulled it out of his pocket, smoothing out the creases. It was the card Keanu had given him the day they walked out of the hardware store. Never give up on yourself. The world always needs someone with your courage. Nathan swallowed hard, his chest tightening. The next morning, on his way to work, he stopped at a coffee shop and bought 2 coffees and a breakfast sandwich. As he stepped outside, he spotted a man sitting on the sidewalk, wrapped in a ragged coat, a cardboard sign propped up in front of him. Nathan approached, kneeling down, placing the coffee and sandwich beside the man. The man looked up, his eyes tired and wary. What's this? Nathan smiled, pushing the coffee toward him. A fresh start. The man hesitated, looking between Nathan and the food. Why? Nathan thought back to a night not long ago, to a man in a hoodie who had asked him a simple question, "That's all you need?" He clapped the man on the shoulder, standing up. Because I can. As he walked away, the world around him felt different. Not because it had changed, but because he had.